For Jim, I was labor for Jim. He had a lot of friends who welded for him, so he didn't really need me to do that. I was basically brute force. Things he needed bending, forging work, grinding, heavy blasting work. That's the work I did for him. I went to a lot of the junkyards with him, and we'd walk around, and he would see stuff on the ground and stuff, and I carried all those stuff out, axles and things like that I would carry out for him. Because I was like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, and I was, you know, strong or whatever, so yeah, I would just lift up the big stuff and take it out. Back then, junkyards were a lot different. They would, especially with Jim, they knew him a long time, many years, and they would let him weld and cut, you know, stuff on the property. That's not allowed anymore, but Jim had a lot of friends, and they would save stuff for him if they thought he was looking for stuff, and he would go through and pick things out that he needed. This piece here, this is probably the heaviest piece we're going to move, and as I said, it's going to come apart in sections. So almost all the big pieces have it like that, where they'll end somewhere on the back end, here and here, and we'll just use a crane. I got an extending boom coming out for this job, because we're going to load them into boxes, not flatbed. We just feel that with some of the conditions of these pieces, that if something were to happen to one were to break, because they haven't been well maintained over the years, because Jim hasn't been alive, if something would happen and they were to break, they'd break inside a trailer. And the pieces would be there when we get to the final destination, where if something happened on a flatbed, and you know, we might lose a piece.
Yeah.
But they've been pretty well maintained. Again, I remember blasting several of these pieces a couple years before Jim died. And he was an expert with painting and mixing paints and priming and all that stuff. And we try to keep them dry off the ground, things like that, to preserve them. When you grow up around them, they're still special, and I still spend time looking at them, but to me they're commonplaces. When it's the expression that other people, when they see them for the first time, that's so amazing.
No, you were at his shop in Farmingdale, or which shop were you at?
I was all the way back to his shops in Red Bank.
And how did you first meet Jim?
Jim met me. Yeah, he was a friend of my mother's before I was even born. You know, being a kid and working and having him give me power tools, and I was doing stuff that other kids, they would never do this day and age. And just stripping apart engines and stuff for him. You know, those are good memories. Jim taught me a lot about auto mechanics. We'd stop for a movie. He loved movies. I think he went to the movie theaters mostly for the air conditioning and to sleep. And I'd watch one or two movies. We'd get up, we'd go to another movie, because he had relationships with movie theaters, because a couple years ago, maybe 20, the Jurassic Parks came out, and he donated pieces to be exhibited, and they gave him like lifetime movie passes and stuff. And he was a big fan of movies and television.
What did he think of those Jurassic Park movies?
I loved them. It was good for business.
What's the hardest part of building these things?
Finding the pieces. He was very particular about pieces. It wouldn't just be that he would grab any spring. When we cleaned up his property, I had to get rid of a lot of stuff. And I could say, you know, pieces like this, he might have had probably about 500 of them in the trailer when I was cleaning up. And I had to scrap like 500 of these. And I would say to Jim often, I'm like, well, and he would go through, he would look, he would try and look, and he would say, no, I don't like any of these. And he would still go to the junkyard and get new ones. Oil pans, he used a lot of oil pans for the head.
You want to all the way in the top of the head there, right?
Those are oil pans. I probably about 200 of them is scrap. I mean, he had enough to build, he had enough pieces to build 20 dinosaurs, let's say. But he wouldn't do it because it wouldn't have been the look he was going for, as he was trying to duplicate from what he saw in a book, from what he saw in a museum, you know, with the bones. If it didn't look like that enough to him, he kept looking for the right piece. So these pieces took a painstakingly long time. Nothing that he did for any of these, actually for any of his pieces, was just slapped together. There was a thought behind every weld, there was a thought behind every rib, you know, the pieces down the neck. I mean, he pre-planned all that. He left nothing to chance. Whether he was right or wrong, he was going for a look that was in his head already. Yeah, you see a little bit of rust there.
Yeah.
There's a joint, so Jim connected everything via joint. You can see another one here. So they would all come apart in sections. And what he just uses pins. Just a pin, one pipe will slide into another, and we drop a pin in there, and that keeps everything in place. I mean, once that pin's dropped, they're not going to move.
Could you put your hand on that pin again?
Sure.
I'll just have your arm in there. Okay, so that's the pin that joins the sections together. Okay.
Slide into each other.
So over here is the separation,
right.
And this is the bolt that holds them together.
I'll show you one I can reach easier. I'm not going to take it all the way out, but you can see how we would just slide them out.
Okay.
Everything's heavy.
How much do you think that little tail piece that's about 10 feet just now weighs?
Not too much, but it's over my head.
Yeah.
Every piece he has, section-wise, I've moved myself. So he made them so that he knows the weight. One of the things that Jim did was he had friends in the truck driving business. So he knew the inside dimensions of trailers and road heights. Most equipment can go down a highway at 13 feet 6 inches without needing special permits. So he got people who had flatbeds, and he measured up from the bottom of the flatbed. And then he knew that when the piece started here at the foot, he'd measure up to the top. So this piece can actually go on an open flatbed trailer, and it's under 13.6, so it can get under every bridge, you know, in the United States, basically. That's, you know, any standard interstate highway bridge without needing special permits or anything. He also, and this one I'm not sure of, but he also made most of his other pieces where they could fit inside sea containers. I think sea containers have a little bit different height issue with them, so maybe not this one. But he shipped pieces to Australia and Japan and things like that, and they went in sea containers. He got his idea in the junkyard. Basically, from what he told me, that's what he said. He just saw piles of scrap. He saw the pieces inside piles of scrap in junkyards, local junkyards. And he was just out there, and he says, "This looks like X dinosaur. This looks like something to me." And he would pick it up. Sometimes he did stuff in stages because he wanted a particular look. And he had that type of mind where he might have seen a part like that a long time ago, and he would try his best to find that part again. He wouldn't substitute.
How long would he spend at the junkyard?
Sometimes when I went with him, because again, he went with other people, he went alone, we'd be there 3-4 hours. Jim would walk, and he would pick stuff out. But he was a man of power. Jim looked like a very large, very tough man, and he was, you know, he had strength. But it wasn't until you really saw him move something that was enormous that you really understood how powerful, how strong his arms were, or bending something. He had access to air tools and that type of thing, but a lot of things we still do with hand tools, turning nuts and bolts by hand. I was telling somebody this story the other day about him building a tool because he didn't have one, fabricating his own wrench. You know, he figured out ways. And we used equipment over time, but most of the stuff, like me putting this stuff on this trailer here, it's just strength. It's knowing it. It's not having any fear.